Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to Sunday Live. How are we all doing? Sorry about a little technical glitch there in the countdown. I've forgotten to do something, but it's all sorted now. We are ready to go. First off, massive apologies once again for not being able to go live last Wednesday. Just had a few problems that I need to sort out and they had to take priority, but we are back now and ready to go. I am going to be joined by Jonty and Chain Bear. And they said Perez then. That would have been brilliant. But I'm going to be joined by Jonty and Chain Bear in just a moment. We're going to be talking Sergio Perez and whether or not he's putting his seat at risk at Force India. We're also going to be talking about the possible quali changes that have been put forward or are rumoured to have been put forward. We're going to go over the concept car scene as we've got Chain Bear with us today. Jonty wanted to chat about them as well. You all got my opinions on them last Friday, I think it was. So it'd be great to get their views on it. We're also going to have a brief mention, hopefully, if we've got time, about tyres. And I'm sure silly season will crop up as well because there's so much going on. Despite the fact that we thought it had all gone a little bit quiet, silly season seems to be spicing up again, thanks to Daniel Kvyat, it seems to be. But we're going to kick things off and say a very good evening to Jonty. Hello, Jonty, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Been a bit of a break, but back on for a Sunday.
Yeah, it's good. Are you feeling better? That's the important thing, mate. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you.
Awesome. No worries, mate. Thank you for coming along. Of course, we'll get into it in just a moment. We're also going to say welcome back and hello to Chain Bear. Hello, Stuart. I think.
Hello, how's it going? Sorry,
He's
I was pressing the wrong button. I'm here.
That's fine. Are you all right? We'll go with that one. We think so, yes.
I'm great.
Awesome. Let's jump straight into it because obviously Sergio Perez set people off on one, I guess is the way to put it, following some antics at the Singapore Grand Prix last weekend. I had my say in obviously the post-race stream and in the review, but I'm going to come straight to you, Jonty. Before we get into the ins and outs of it all, what's your take on his driving from that weekend? Because for me, I think it was pretty reckless at times.
Yeah, erratic would be a very polite way to put it. There was certainly some big questions to be asked of his behaviour, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's sort of raised a few questions from last year again, hasn't it? We were I'm going to go over something we talked about later on from last year, actually, Jonty. Not many, obviously, will have been following the channel from then, so we'll be able to cover that then. But yeah, just a bit of a scruffy weekend. What about you, Stuart? What was your take on his driving in Singapore?
I'm still very disappointed. I was initially more of the mindset that he was angry and aggressive in his driving, and I've come to reflect, I'm not entirely sure that's exactly what it was, but I'm sure we'll get into that in a second. But I think it's more, I'm astounded at his lack of spatial awareness more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go over the Ocon one in just a moment because I think that's the one that really has got people debating it a little bit more. But the Sirotkin one for me, we got a penalty for that, so you could argue, let it go. He's served his punishment, but just something doesn't stack up with that. And because of that incident, that for me calls into question his integrity over the Ocon incident. He's saying, I didn't see Ocon, didn't mean for that to happen, it was an accident, was avoiding people on the left, whatever he was doing. But the Sirotkin one, for whatever reason, despite the fact the move was done, Jonty, on fresher tyres, so he had the traction to carry on down that straight quite easily, keep that position, he, for some baffling reason, decides to turn left and into him.
Yeah, I really didn't understand that one. I mean, there's various arguments he's made and other people have tried to make for the Ocon incident, and we'll get into them. With Sirotkin, he had absolutely no reason to move left. None at all. That's what I don't understand.
What got me? I think I messaged you actually, Jonty, with a bit of a rant about it, because what got me was when Perez came out afterwards and said, I went to cover the line and I think he was too close. He thinks he's too close. He hit him. I mean, you can't get any closer, can you?
Yeah, and to be fair, that's not a great statement because he was the one making the move. He was the one attacking, trying to overtake, so he's the one that's too close, if anything.
It just got me as well, because I don't understand why he's going to cover at that corner. Like I say, Stuart, he's got the fresher tyres, so he's going to be pretty quick out of the traction zone, so it shouldn't be a problem getting past him. I can't see Sirotkin throwing one up the inside in the next corner because that's both of them out of the race, so he doesn't need to make that move, does he?
No, he didn't need to make the move. And I mean, it's a little easy to reflect on it as a spectator and given the time afterwards, as opposed to in the moment when you're in the driving seat all het up. I tend to be someone who gives people the benefit of the doubt. And rather than suggest that Perez was having a bit of argy-bargy, I think he was moving over to squeeze Sirotkin so that he had a little bit less room going to be able to attack into the next corner. Because don't forget, Sirotkin had been right next to him through the previous 3 or 4 corners. Like just when Perez thought he'd got clear of him, Sirotkin was still there around the corners. And we've seen before people make moves where they make aggressive moves to tighten the corner for the other car, and normally the other car thinks, "Oh, I have to move over because he's not giving me any space here." But it's something I've thought about quite a lot before. What happens if the other on the attacking car decides not to move over, and then you have an accident?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I feel a bit bad. I don't want to go on a Perez bashing live stream because he's a good driver, and I don't know how you feel about this. I've spoken to Jonty about it loads, but I feel he's quite underrated as a midfield driver, and he's consistent and delivers.
Yeah, I rate him highly. I think he's intelligent. I think he's got a lot of good natural pace. I would love to see him in a bigger team to see what he could do. I know he had that spell at McLaren, but I don't think that really counts. It wasn't the right time for him there. And as through a lot of last season, we've seen head-to-head, wheel-to-wheel with a car. Can he hold it all together? Emotionally, mentally, that's a big question mark.
Yeah, and I suppose that could be what's put big teams off or bigger teams off in the past. Does Ferrari really want to put him in that situation if he might pull that against a Vettel, Mercedes if he tries it against a Hamilton? So I suppose that's maybe why he's not got that move. Obviously, timing as well in Formula One's a big thing. But we said last year, Jonty, I think it was after Belgium, we were talking about this in a stream. Obviously, we weren't very big back then, so I don't know, it's worth repeating, definitely. But we both kind of agreed that Perez with Ocon as a teammate, Sergio Perez seems to almost... Is panic the wrong word with Ocon around him? He feels more threatened than him, or appears to be more threatened by him than he has any teammate he's had.
You do get that impression. And thinking about that more, when he was at Sauber, he was always delivering spectacular results in a car that shouldn't have been where it was. Nearly winning a race, and there was lots and lots of 4th, 5th place action when that car should not have even been challenging for the top 8. So he's then taken that, moved into a bigger team to deliver even better results. But now all of a sudden, he was doing that, but all of a sudden he's got a teammate who is matching him and beating him. And I don't think he's got the mentality to deal with that. It's very different to the McLaren situation because at that time, the McLaren was, garbage. Let's be quite honest. And he wasn't the guy leading the team. He was very much the second driver, learning from the guy ahead. It's just a position I don't think he's been in before, and he doesn't quite know how to cope with it.
Yeah, I just thought it was worth mentioning again. I completely agree with you. He's not a bad guy. I don't think he is. He's a very good racing driver. And I just think that Ocon is the first teammate. I'm just trying to think. I mean, even Hülkenberg, who we do rate highly, Jonty, wasn't really a match for Ocon. Not for Ocon, for Perez, as I remember. Whereas Ocon, this year alone, I think he's had 4 retirements to Perez's 1. Okay, Perez had the podium, but Ocon's only 1 point behind him in the championship. So that gives you some idea as to just how close they are. And I think he is threatened by that. And I think like I say, I think panic is the wrong word, but I think he kind of flaps a bit when they get side by side. We saw that last year, didn't we? A lot of coming togethers, but all of this from Sunday is called, first course force Indy to call team orders, which I don't like. I want to see them racing, but you can kind of understand, can't you, Stuart, from their point of view, given, the points they need to make up in the championship now between now and the end of the season. They can't have them running into each other.
No, and it's a big shame they have to enforce team orders once again, because that is a fast car and they haven't got that many points. So both drivers are very, very hungry to start accumulating points for the team again. Obviously, they've got their own points. But the team obviously have to think about how far they can claw their way up the championship without both drivers putting themselves out, as they have done many times before. Ocon has barely got a hope of a seat for next year as it is, but I think Perez in particular is aware that this is a moment in his career. He's in a strong midfield team. He's demonstrated himself, but there are very few seats in the top teams, and these are the years where he's going to get either plucked from the midfield or left to die there. Obviously not literally. But yeah, I think Force India don't really have a choice. And it's a big shame. It's a really big shame because when they fight, it's interesting and exciting. And if they could just stop running into each other, we'd have some good racing on our hands.
Definitely two very good racing drivers going toe to toe. That's what we want to see in a competitive car. But before we are going to talk about his future, which is kind of the crux of this first topic, I guess. But I do just want to go over a couple of things from the incident with Ocon on Sunday with the onboard from Perez's car and another onboard as well, which for me, this is just my opinion, is quite damning on Sergio Perez. He said it was an accident. He didn't see Ocon and didn't mean for it to happen, but you can see from the onboard there, that's the best one I can get of his steering wheel, is he is turning slightly right, but he's effectively opened up the steering, straightened it all up, whilst everybody else, even the car ahead, the Red Bull ahead, is still steering slightly left. He's opened up, and that's caused contact with Esteban Ocon. That, for me, is damning enough. But a lot of people have said he was covering the inside line. He was worried about the Haas coming up the inside, was trying to leave space and all of this. This is the onboard from Alonso's car, and that is completely damning because there is nothing up his inside whatsoever. Grosjean is a fair way back, I would say, in that image. So, okay, we can only take Checo at face value on it, I suppose. He's saying it was an accident, didn't mean for it to happen, but, it just looks quite damning to me, Jonty.
Yeah, literally just as it was about to come out of my mouth, it appears in the chat. Anthony Davidson was picking this apart. And he said that at first he was adamant straight away, just racing incident, first lap, it's always tight. Then when he watched that onboard, you could clearly see the steering open up just at the right moment. And the fact that you heard no little spin up of the revs to indicate that he was correcting any kind of oversteer. The rear hadn't lost any adhesion. So that's not an argument. And to cover this point, if he was covering the inside line, surely you go further inside rather than outside.
What do you think, Stuart, on that incident?
Yeah, I'm aware of this argument, and I did see the Anthony Davidson video as well. And obviously, as Anthony Davidson said, we will never know truly what Perez was thinking. My own take is slightly less I guess, damning of Perez. And again, we have to remember this is all happening in fractions of a second, and a lot of it is instinct. When you're sitting in the car, your sense of what's happening around you, there's sounds of the cars behind to the side of you. There's the flash in the mirror. There's the kind of knowledge that the Haas had come back onto the track and was sorted up the inside. And I think that move to the right, I think, is either there's a Haas on the inside, or there's someone on my outside. I'm just gonna cover that off slightly, but not entirely have an awareness of where that car is or what will happen next. And I think it's an instinctual move. It's so quick that I don't think there's quite enough time to strategize that as an aggressive move. It kind of reminds me of sort of the opposite state of this is a long time going back, but 1997, when Schumacher got sort of disqualified from the entire championship for ramming Jacques Villeneuve, part of the evidence that the FIA used to disqualify him was he made two moves. He sort of darted towards Villeneuve and then changed his mind and then had a second go at it. And it was that second move that made them think, that wasn't instinct, that was a decisive ramming into Jacques Villeneuve. So part of me, I think, is this sort of instinct that might be misguided. I think, Perez has himself a lot of accidents, and I think he needs to maybe curb the way his instincts make his driving so aggressive.
I mean, I'm going to say nothing on the Schumacher stuff because I was a Schumacher fanboy, so I probably just going to upset everybody with what I want to say. But on the Perez thing, I think you're spot on there as well, Stuart. And we have to remember, it's all right for us sat here picking this to pieces, and it's all right Anthony Davidson doing it. I've never sat in a Formula One car. I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you have, Stuart, ever sat in one, or Jonty, but let alone raced one. So we have no idea what's going through their mind at these points, and they are split-second decisions. So, but for me, looking back to Belgium last year and things like that, and then the incident with Sirotkin, that's what that's what calls his integrity into question a little bit with this move. But at the same time, it's racing. We want wheel-to-wheel action. We can't then go moaning every 5 minutes when there is contact, can we, Jonty? There's going to be contact in wheel-to-wheel racing.
Yeah, well, let's be honest. We're kind of happy that there's some there because we've all got something to talk about. And it keeps everyone debating between the races. I mean, that's the good thing to come from stuff like this. But I do think he just needs to just chill a little bit. If someone's getting right on him right at the start, just relax a little bit. It'll come back to you. I think it could well be a case that because he's feeling the pressure, especially with all the Force India stuff going on and how crazy silly season is, that he just feels like he's got to go out and win on lap one and forgetting how long a race is.
Nice little link there, Jonty, to silly season and talking about his future. I like that. But there was an article, I think it's on Sky Sports I was reading, and a couple of others as well that are out there that I've been reading today, which is why I kind of wanted to do this, saying that this could put his seat at Force India in jeopardy if it were to continue, or even just on what happened in Singapore, because Lawrence Stroll's come in and bought the team. Yes, they would like a little bit more money. I'm sure they'd love Perez to bring his Mexican money, but they don't need the cash at Force India anymore. They're already looking and building to the future. I think the article said something about they want to expand as well. And a great point in that I really picked up on. Does Lawrence Stroll want a driver like Perez potentially running into Lance Stroll every weekend, or any teammate for that matter, in what is going to be an incredibly tight midfield next year? If you look at what we've got this year, everyone's going to develop. How tight is it going to be next year with cars that apparently will be able to follow a little bit easier? So they can't afford to drop these points. So there's a lot of talk that perhaps all of a sudden Perez, who apparently was supposed to be signing, or it was all supposed to be sorted before Singapore and announced, hasn't signed. And could they now be thinking, well, hang on a minute, Ocon doesn't bring money, but he gets on with Stroll. He's not having these incidents. He's not causing these incidents with Perez. Yes, Perez brings money, but let's keep Ocon on board. Come to you first, Jonty.
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid thought, because I'll go back to the point I've made several times in the past. A lot of these midfield teams, especially the ones with lesser financial backing, like Force India, they need to have the drivers working as a team, as well as, all of the team in the garage. If you go back to when this first really kicked off between these two, Canada last year, where Ocon was on the fresher tyres, he was clearly quicker, but because of how difficult it is to follow, couldn't make an impact, and Perez wouldn't let him through. If they'd worked together as a team, Perez lets Ocon through, but then gets towed along, grabbing the DRS from him when he can. They both end up better off. The team ends up better off. All the way down the line, it all works together. They need to be focusing on getting two drivers that will work together. Forget their own individual results. Just a couple of years, just pulling each other around to make sure that the team's getting more. And then when they're so much higher up the championship, because they've been able to do that, they'll have the money to really attack and start thinking about podiums all the time and wins.
What about you, Stuart? Do you think this could affect his seat at Force India, or are you pretty confident that's done? He'll stay.
I'm not confident at all about Perez's seat or anyone's seat at Force India. I would say if you were the kind of team owner who wanted to get rid of Perez, this gives you a very good opening to do that. And if you're the kind of team owner who's reading the reaction to Ocon and realizing Ocon is a pretty solid driver, and maybe he's not the one who has to leave to bring your son in. Yeah, that does give you an opening. I think Force India have a very tricky decision on their hands. I was going to say I'd be surprised if this was a tipping point for Perez, but I'm not sure. As a team who has had to get these two to cool off several times over the last couple of years, I'm not sure. And I think it would be a great shame if he was dropped. But I could say the same for Ocon, and Ocon hasn't displayed the kind of behaviour you sort of listed a couple of minutes ago.
I mean, I like the phrase, it gives them an excuse. Sort of, if they're looking for one, that's the thing. Neither of these drivers can really afford to give them that option, can they? But I was just sat here listening to you then and thinking to myself, we're in a position where we're talking about Perez or Ocon potentially not being on the grid for 2019. I don't want to get into this debate too much, Jonty, but that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is. There's not much more to say about that.
I just you think of some of the drivers. Yeah, let's not even go there. Let's not even go there. But I'm going to put you both. You would both have full control of Force India, except you have to have your son Lance Stroll in the car. Which one do you take, Perez or Ocon or somebody else, Jonty? I love it, putting you on the spot.
Out of the two, I would have to say I would take Ocon.
Stuart?
Yeah, I would take Ocon. I just think he's a. It's tricky. Like, I wouldn't want to get rid of Perez, but I feel like Ocon is on the upswing and a more solid driver at the moment.
I'd go Ocon, obviously. If you saw my video yesterday, that's an obvious answer. But Perez to Haas, maybe?
It could happen.
I think Perez at Haas would work.
They could well be the fourth fastest car as well next year, and if there's the question marks over what Honda can do with Red Bull, they might be able to pick a few points off them. So Haas will be a very attractive prospect for Perez, and obviously he takes. I don't think Haas need the money though either, really, do they? I mean, I'm sure it's nice, but I don't know why I thought Perez to Haas. It just sort of came to me in a moment there. But we'll move on from this one. I'll take your guys' points in the chat as well when we get over to Q&A. But quali changes. The most boring part of the weekend, they're looking at changing it. So Liberty are looking at tweaking the qualifying stream and taking it from a 3-part session to a 4-part session. Okay, so at the moment we've got qualifying 1, qualifying 2, qualifying 3. We lose 5 cars from Q1, 5 cars from Q2. Then we've got the top 10 shootout in Q3, which is brilliant and doesn't need tweaking. But the proposal apparently is for 4 cars to drop from Q1, Q2 and Q3, and then for whatever reason have an 8-car shootout in Q4. Now, Liberty Media, these changes have apparently been put forward, but there is no indication as to whether or not the session would extend or whether it would stay at 1 hour. So, initial reaction to that, Jonty, just changes for changes' sake as usual?
Yeah. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. They tried to do something before, which could have worked, but they did it wrong. I am under no illusions that if they tried to do this, they would again do it wrong.
What about you, Stuart? Your first reaction to this incredible news?
Oh, I mean, I hope this is all rumour and guff. There's absolutely no reason to do this, and I don't know why they keep fiddling with qualifying when qualifying's clearly not the place to be fiddling. When I was reading up on this, I just was making notes, and all of my notes were negatives about why this was the wrong idea.
I should say, when we're talking about rumour, this has come from Auto Motor und Sports, but the fact that they're talking about this being promoted by Liberty Media says there's probably some truth in it, whether it's just that somebody at Liberty sat down one day and went, should we do it to 4 parts? And somebody else said no, and then obviously this paper or whatever have come out and picked up on that and run with it. I don't know, but we'll find out, I suppose. I think it's, qualifying doesn't need to change. I think the only session that's ever really needed a tweak, I loved the old days, here he goes, old man again, but I loved the old days when we had 1 hour, 12 laps, go out and get on with it. But that often led to a good 20, 25 minutes at the start of the session when nothing happened, and it all happened towards the end. I loved one-shot qualifying and that double jeopardy, that was brilliant. But this new or what I still call a new qualifying format, but of course it isn't, it's been around for a long time, I think is brilliant because you've got tension and drama through the full hour, Jonty, and that's what you want. And with the way racing is at the minute on the Sunday, qualifying on Saturday, certainly for Singapore and certainly for, I'd say, Belgium, was the most exciting part of the weekend, really, and it doesn't need to change.
Yeah, exactly. It works fine. Everyone enjoys qualifying, and like you say, with some of the less exciting races, it's the best part of the weekend. It doesn't need to be messed around with. They tried this with the continual knockouts going to a timer, which I genuinely believe could have worked and been brilliant. But they did it as a flat cutoff where it should have been the lap you're on. That was the problem. If they just tried that, I think it could have really worked. and made it even more exciting than it is now. But if they're not going to do something like that, just leave it alone.
That Saturday in Australia was chaos, wasn't it? Absolute chaos. I hated that. I mean, I agree. They could have made it work, but I just like it as it is. And I'd understand if they were making some huge change, Stuart, but I don't. They're just going to stick another qualifying session in and cut us down to 8 for the shootout. And I don't understand why.
Yeah, exactly. And this may be this might be when my rant begins, because I cannot imagine what they're trying to achieve that a 3-part qualifying doesn't already give us. I mean, the first problem here is you've got less time in each session to set a lap, which kind of pushes you more towards a sort of, 1 lap shootout. You just go whenever you want, but it kind of like constricts everyone to how many laps they can do per session, depending on how they time it. And with the breaks in between, you've only got about 10 or 12 minutes maximum per session, because you've got to have those 5-minute advert breaks in the middle. This also means that you'll focus less TV coverage on the smaller teams, because if everyone's sort of going at once in each session, then obviously you're going to be looking at Mercedes, you're going to be looking at Ferrari, and you're not going to sort of have an awareness of who's on the dropout bubble, because you're not going to be able to get as many laps in. And again, if you've got 4 qualifying sessions, the first session is where all the smallest teams will drop out. So again, they get less exposure, which is bad for them, which is bad for their sponsors, which means they're less valuable as teams and they get less money from their sponsors. And potentially they start racing through more tyres, because they're going to have to go and do 4 sessions. If they do get 2 3-lap runs in every session, which they may have to do to guarantee their position, they may have to rip through 8 sets of tyres. Unless you're the bigger teams, in which case you probably get away with using used tyres or at least scrubbed in tyres, which again gives the bigger teams an advantage over the smaller teams. So every single angle from this is kind of bad. That's my opinion.
No, I'm not going to disagree with you on any of that. I just seen a couple in chat. Astro said there's lots of things F1 need to fix. Quali format, not one of them. Agree. And I'm going to call him Mr. Skeptical, because he's probably kind of tapped into my brain a little bit here. And it is Robert McPhee, who just says simply, more ad breaks? Be an opportunity, wouldn't it, Jonty, to stick some ad breaks in between that fourth session, the third and fourth session?
Well, I apologise to people if this sounds like some kind of stereotyping or generalisation, but it's an American company. Just for a random example, look at the Super Bowl. It's about an hour and 20 minutes of sport that lasts 4 hours. That kind of says everything.
I mean, I'm possibly a little bit sceptical. Probably that's why I've probably gone a little bit sceptical with that one. But it just feels it's unnecessary. There's not really much more I can say on it, unless I just keep repeating the fact that it seems completely pointless. Unless coming to you first, Stuart, unless you can think or you found some reason given somewhere why they're thinking of doing it, because I can't genuinely think of a decent reason why they would do it.
Something has just occurred to me in the last minute.
Nervous now.
Well, no. So before we went on air, I did try and find this article on Auto Mundo and Sport, and I couldn't find it because I kind of wanted to go to the source and see exactly what they were saying. So I couldn't find it. So I don't know if they've panicked and deleted it or something. But so the English article on Planet F1, which sources Auto Mundo and Sport, there's a chance they may have sort of had an interpretation on what a 4-part qualifying session means. Anyway, so my thought is, what if Formula One are considering doing a Formula E style qualifying where they group cars randomly, and then there's like a session 1, session 2, session 3, session 4. So you've only got so many cars on tracks in each session. You can split it up, have your 4 ad breaks, and everybody gets a sort of chance to set a number of laps, and then maybe you have a super pole thing at the end. So maybe that's what they're thinking. And in that case, that's a whole different ballgame.
That's a good. I'd never even thought of that. That's a really good point. I got nervous because I thought you were going to say it ties in nicely for betting, or something like that. But I don't want to set Jonty off on that one. So Yeah, do you think that's a good point, Jonty, or do you think maybe they are just tinkering for the sake of tinkering, or they've got some really clever idea up their sleeve, like the Formula E qualifying?
Possibly, but we've seen this kind of thing in the past from Liberty. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next week or two we find out about some other thing that they're doing which is massively controversial, and this will just keep that attention away from it.
I was going to suggest that earlier, a bit like they did with the grid girls, if you remember back to when everything was negative, wasn't it, about Ferrari threatening to leave and all these rule changes and all this. Oh, we're dropping grid girls, by the way. And then I think it was the betting thing was announced just after they started with how some other stuff as well. They'd announced something else, and then that came out and it looked negative, and so they've come out with this one now to cover that, if that makes sense. So, oh yeah, we're going to introduce betting to Formula One. Oh, by the way, we'd like to change the qualifying system. It kind of, we were talking about this in the winter, weren't we? It kind of draws attention away from that big negative thing they've gone out with.
Yeah, exactly. They seem to be very, very good at doing that. Reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Zaphod was president of the galaxy, but all he had to do was take your attention away from all the silly things that were going on, and that's what's happening here.
It's a good reference. I like that. But yeah, there's not really anything else to say on the quote, unless you've got something you want to add, Stuart or Jonty, to this one.
No, I think we covered the main points. It'll be interesting to see if Liberty actually say anything about this.
We'll find out soon. We're only a week away from Russia, so that's going to get interesting. I do wonder. But we're going to talk about the concept cars, because I went over these last Friday and kind of gave opinion. I'm not very technically minded, but I just went, that looks pretty and that'll do. But basically, I wanted to get some other opinions on it. So we're going to have a look at these concept cars. I'm going to start with concept one. I know you're working on something as well, Stuart, so this is quite nicely timed for you. But out of the concepts, which one do you think is the best one, or the most viable for Formula One? Probably a better question.
Okay, well, first thing is the three concepts they're not distinct concepts from each other. They're actually evolutions of the ideas they've been sort of thinking about. So the first concept is sort of focused around their ideas for the halo. The second concept sort of has some kind of aesthetic ideas, and the third concept kind of brings in some of the aero ideas brought in through concept two. So there's sort of like an evolution of their thinking coming along. But so starting with concept one, which is really just focused around how do we make the halo less distasteful to people. And, I think they've done a nice job of sort of streamlining it out. When I sort of described it, I kind of described it as looking like it had been sort of shaped by the air flowing over the car. It kind of fits very nicely with the rest of the shape of the car. My first question is, would this halo work? Is this just an aesthetic design? Do they know they can make a halo that works in this shape? Is it strong enough? And if not, maybe we'll end up with a sort of a covering to the existing halo, or sort of some kind of carbon fairings that sit over the top of the halo that makes it look a little bit more pleasing.
Yes, they've got to be so careful, haven't they, legally with this halo? If they go and make a big change to it and then something happens, God forbid, they're in some serious trouble. But, I mean, that to me, correct me if I'm wrong, Jonty, looks a lot closer to the original concepts we saw from, I think it was Mercedes, when the halo was first put forward.
Yeah, it looks exactly the same. The only difference being the first iteration that Mercedes put out was actually designed to have hinges at the back for the driver to get in and out. But that would never work. That's always going to introduce a very significant point of failure. But this, they can certainly make it strong enough. Don't have any worries about that, even where it's coming down, tapering down very thin at the front. My problem is the image on the top left, where it's clearly dipping into the central pillar, where you can see a nice big domed piece of the driver's helmet. So the halo would do absolutely nothing there. It wouldn't stop anything because it's not there. That's kind of the whole point of it.
Yeah, I was wondering that, looking at that one, but they've got to get this right. If this is what they go with and it is just for the halo aesthetically, then they've got to make sure that's right, because they can't afford that to go the idea, just no, let's not even go there. But concept 2, by the way, Stuart, I loved your little video you put on Twitter about just squashing the car up to the right.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. It's an extension of the idea they did with the 2017. The 2017 cars, where everything, the front wing and rear wing elements were just sort of skewed rearwards to make it look faster. Very simple idea. Concept 2. This sort of introduces their idea of making an aggressive looking package, sort of all of it pulled back tightly at the rear. They do introduce some aero concepts though, which again we'll expand on in concept 3. It's these things called the shark fin posts and some winglets and some wishbone covers, which are labeled in, I don't know which drawing it is, but it's the drawing with the 3 red cars. So other than looking kind of aesthetically nice, I think what we're seeing here, and they haven't spoken very much about it, is trying to control the airflow that moves around the side of the car. So from the front wing, through the front wheels, around the body of the car, and then back in again, sort of out through the rear wing or under the diffuser. This whole area around the side of the car is where all the high energy, aggressive, turbulent vortices, that's the source of all the dirty air that comes out of the back of the car and ruins the air for the next car coming along and takes away all its downforce. So if you can control this air or de-energize it, take out some of the vortices, the air you leave behind you will be less dirty, and the car chasing you will have a lot less of it, this downforce loss we've been seeing. And Ross Brawn said their models are currently, the chasing car loses half of its downforce. So I think that's what they're looking to do here.
That's a lot to lose, isn't it? And it has a big impact on the racing. I mean, what do you think of concept 2, Jonty?
Well, like Stuart said, it's just kind of introducing some of the aero ideas. So it's not that dissimilar to concept 1, apart from maybe the wings. And obviously the change in the body shape, which, looking at it on these images, they will have a very hard time getting to the constriction at the rear of the car that this would hint at. They've still got to have the engine and the gearbox and all the bits and pieces that go onto that in there. You can only restrict it down so much.
Yeah, I mean, the more I see of concept 2, the more I quite like it. But I'm also I can't ever see an F1 car being that curvy. We've seen so many concepts in the past where they all look nice and flowing, and they never come out that way, do they? And I must say as well, concepts, how many concepts have we had down the years, and they never look anything like that? So that is all this is at the moment. But I quite like concept 2. Like I say, I'm not particularly technically minded, which is why I'm glad Stuart's here to help me with this one. But I do like the look of that. I can appreciate a good looking car, and it turns out I'm actually in the minority with concept 3. I said last Friday I thought it was the best looking by a mile and looks absolutely stunning, and a lot of people said I was crazy or blind. Concept 3, Stuart, what's your take on that one?
I can see the appeal of concept 3. I think it's a little bit messy, and I think this is sort of a culmination of lots of ideas they've thrown at this model. There's a lot in here that I don't quite understand, and I'm assuming is aesthetic. So again, following on from concept 2, you'll see a lot of aero devices down the side of the car. There's one in front of the rear wheels, there's one behind the front wheels, there's one popping out of the side pod, and all these vanes, the one behind the front wheels will probably completely de-energize a lot of the vortices. It's very long. And again, a lot of them just feed you through to the rear wing, not the rear wing, the rear wheel. And again, just working the air and trying to just stop it being a complete mess when it comes out the back of the car. Something I didn't mention with concept 2, which is continued here, is the fact that the upper element of the front wing joins up with the pillars from the nose. And what that will help to do is take away the wingtip vortices on the inside of the front wing, which is where this whole mess starts. So if you can de-energize it there, which is also what the end plates on the front wing are doing, that'll be a big help. really strange thing happening at the rear wing. Like, it's lovely that it's like nice and wide and low, which is good for balance and downforce, but it seems to be one big piece of shaped carbon fiber, and I'll be blown if this particular design looks like it can be adjusted. I don't know if you can see anything here, but with the wings we currently have, the flaps their angle can be adjusted, so you can work on the setup and work out whether you want downforce drag. The balance of the car can be adjusted, but here we've got this kind of one molded, lovely looking wing shape. Can't see how they're going to work with it. There's a little, if you look at the rear view of it, there's a little tiny wing underneath, which I don't know is what they're thinking is the DRS flap or something, and I don't know if they're expecting that to be adjusted or not. My thoughts are a lot of these the rear wing, the side pods, the weird gap between like the top of the car and the side pods, that kind of like space there, as if they've kind of just like stuck the top of the car onto the bottom of the car. I think a lot of that is the work of a graphic artist and not much to do with actual engineering. And I imagine Concept 4, if it props up, will take away a lot of the weird stuff on this car.
I have to say, I mean, I love the look of it, but I do not believe for 1 second that would ever rock up on a grid in Formula One. I completely agree that there's not. It looks a bit like, correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, but it looks a little bit like they've gone for a lot more spec parts, a lot more spec aero on this.
Yeah, I mean, that was my thought when I was sort of looking over it. I was thinking the only way you could get some of this to actually work as intended was to bring in some spec parts, bring in some sort of spec fins, some spec turning vanes and barge boards down the side of the car. Otherwise, engineers will run amok. And this is part of what I sort of go into a video that I'm bringing out tomorrow. But essentially, when you and why a lot of these concept cars, as you say, do not end up looking like the cars you see on the track is there's a very difficult task at bringing your concepts, which is what you want the cars to do. So Ross Brawn and his team are like, we want the cars to be less sensitive to aerodynamic disturbance and cause less dirty air behind the cars. That's what we want. That's our concept. And this is how we imagine it would look brought to life. Unfortunately, you have to make rules that constrict the engineers enough so that these concepts are brought to life, because it's not a spec series and the engineers have to be able to go wild and design their own parts and try and build the fastest cars they can. You have to word these rules very carefully. And what happens is you have the best of intentions. The classic example is when they tried to lower the noses because they wanted the safety benefits of a lower nose, and they didn't think that the engineers love high noses. So obviously they're going to have a high nose as much as they can, and they didn't think they're just going to like drop the nose as soon as they were legally allowed to. So they've got a very difficult task at trying to get anyone to make cars that look like these. I think one final thing I will say is all of these designs are at least a year old. There's no chance in hell that this press release was planned. It was purely off the back of the fact that these images were leaked in a tweet, and the F1 clearly just thought, "Oh my god, we've got to put something together to explain these before gossip gets out of control and everyone starts second guessing what we're doing." There's the old F1 logo on Concept 3, which is the latest, most up-to-date version, and that clearly was made sometime last summer. So God knows where they are 1 year on.
The dead giveaway, that logo, isn't it? But I absolutely agree. The problem is they'll write the rules, and then an Adrian Newey will come along, won't he, Jonty, and make something completely different.
Yeah, well, as Stuart was saying, they do have a very difficult task in trying to word the rules in such a specific way that the engineers can't just abuse things. That's how the T-Wing came about, because they give the teams all of the technical documentation saying things can be this big and this distance from this part and so far up, so far back, etc. And then the designers, the first thing they do is go away and draw a 3D CAD model to the maximum of all of those allowances, which gives them a nice simple box to say, right, this is where we can fit things in. And last year, that ended up that there was a nice vertical box just in front of the rear wing. Go, oh, we could stick something there because it fits within the dimensions, but doesn't fit within the spirit of the rules. And with a concept like this, I can't imagine what kind of crazy shapes they'd end up with. I mean, it would almost be allowing them to run amok. 'Cause if you look at how high up the end fences of the front wing are, the bits there on the side, there would have to be a spec element, because otherwise the wings would make the ones we have now look simple and mundane.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have a favourite out of the three of them, Jonty?
I have to say the third one, just purely on the aesthetics. I mean, it really is a fantastic looking car, and I don't think anyone would complain if we had a grid full of cars that look like that. But I do have a problem with all of them, to be quite honest. I think I mentioned it to you, is that the design of the rear wings, there is a massive problem here. The way they're extended out over the rear tyres, to me, that is a recipe for disaster, because we see already now that a rear puncture, the drivers have to crawl around to hopefully not destroy the floor and possibly even damage the diffuser and suspension. With these kinds of rear wings, someone gets a rear puncture, that's a guaranteed DNF, because it's just going to rip the rear wing off the car completely. So that's a very big issue that they really need to look at, if these are going to be the plans that they're going with, that kind of rear wing. I still haven't seen, in practice designs for next year. It could be an issue as soon as 2019.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, we have discussed it a little bit, didn't we? Just chatted about it in Discord. But yeah, have you got a favourite, Stuart, or do you quite like what we've got as it is?
I'm not a massive fan of what we got right now. I think my favorite is probably Concept 2, because I do quite see, I'm in these kind of two minds. Like, aesthetically, I prefer Concept 2. I think I like a cleaner design, though. As kind of messy as they were, I did like all the winglets and weird stuff that was on like the cars towards the back end of the 2000s, which kind of ended up in 2008, where winglets were all over the car and they just looked like porcupines. That fascinates me, and as a sort of like someone interested in aerodynamics and all the technical ideas people have come up with to exploit the rules, I find that quite fascinating. It was a bit of a shame when they got rid of the ability of people to exploit that. I prefer Concept 2. There's some weird stuff happening in Concept 3 that bugs me. But if we got it, I wouldn't complain. I think it's a quite a handsome car. Still confused about the rear wing, but I think Jonty makes a good point, though. We do have rear wings that go over the rear tires right now, not as aggressively as they do here.
Yeah, I mean, interesting point you make there. I miss the days when teams would rock up with things like the X-Wings on the car, and then the FIA would have to mess around to try and get them banned as quickly as possible. I miss those days. That was when engineers could design stuff, give it a go, and if it fails, then they don't put it on the car, or the FIA have to try and ban it. I miss those days. We talk about it a lot, don't we, Jonty? The days when engineers had a bit more free reign.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and Stuart's absolutely right. Some of the cars that we were having sort of 2006 and 2007 looked fantastic. 2006 Toyota in particular, it looked awesome. The only bit I didn't like with all those evolutions was Hamilton's winning McLaren in 2008 with the moustache wing, sort of the little bit of carbon fibre that connected the end fences in front of the nose. That looked utterly ridiculous.
I used to hate the Viking horns. And then I went to Donington a few months back and looked at them again, and I love them and miss them so much.
Yeah, and there's all little bits we've had in the past which probably should be looked at. I mean, the walrus nose. So many people hate it, but it had potential.
And I really like that it was something different. I really like the walrus nose. I'd like, wow, there's still room for people to take a completely different direction with what has been functionally identical for years and years and years. I mean, I liked the mustache wing and I liked the Viking horns. I liked all of it. I didn't like the weird antlers that appeared on the top of noses sometimes.
No, some random stuff.
Yeah, there were some very odd ones there. But this comes with another problem. They just don't seem to have as much of the freedom to try things because the rules are so tight, because of people trying ridiculous things. I mean, look at the wing on the nose of the arrows. That was never, ever going to happen. It's a completely idiotic idea, and the X-Wings. But they need to have the chance, so, or if someone does away with the central nose pillar and has the front wing mounted by the end fences, gives them a nice big hole in the front to use more air under the car. They need to be able to try this stuff, even if it's just in testing, to see what would happen. When it comes to that problem, I think I said before that they have to say things specifically because of loopholes. Like the classic P-34. The only reason it happened was because there wasn't a rule that specifically said cars should only have 4 wheels.
Yeah. That was a car, wasn't it?
It was the way they turned around and go, what do you mean it's not allowed? Doesn't say you can't have 6 wheels. It's like, yeah, but it's a car. It's kind of implied. Yeah, but it doesn't say that.
Brilliant. Them were the days. Pipe and slippers. Here he goes. But yeah, we'll move on from concept cars and discussing like this. Tyres. I didn't put any pictures. I just realised the tyres. But Hankook. Is it pronounced Hankook? Am I saying that right?
I think so.
They are going head-to-head with Pirelli to be supplying future tyres for F1. It's been confirmed as well, no tyre war, which I know we were talking about it briefly before we came on, Stuart, that I quite like the idea of a tyre war, but I can understand why they haven't gone for it. But do you think it's time for a change of tyre manufacturer in the sport?
Part of me thinks yes. I have been, I think, an increasing minority that's quite happy with Pirelli in some sense. I think they've been harassed quite a bit when really they're just trying their best to the Pirelli are very much of the what do you want from us? You want us more aggressive stints, we'll make the tires run out. Oh, you don't like the tires running out, so we'll make them hard as rocks. What do you want from us? I think they've tried really hard to kind of be everything for everyone and haven't really been anyone for anyone, and kind of like their compounds, patience is running thin. So it would be interesting to see someone else take that on that role. I'm amazed anyone has bothered to go to tender, bearing in mind they have to make a completely different tyre for 2020 before they increase the size of the rims in 2021. I thought that would be like a deal breaker because it'd be so expensive to actually bother making a certain type of tyre for 1 year.
That's a great point, yeah.
That's exactly the point I was going to make. It kind of shows how silly the FIA can be at times. It's you got the rules changing to these wheels in 2021, so just extend Pirelli to that point, or bring the wheel change forward. One or the other. It's literally the reason why Michelin pulled out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Hankook will get it. I think it will stay with Pirelli, and I kind of agree with what Stuart's saying. They're given this, we want you to do this, and then when they do it, people complain they've done it, and then they tell them to do something else, and they're trying to kind of find this middle ground, and they can't do it. But I don't think they've done a bad job. I think this year, I'm a little bit disappointed this year because all the compounds are a grade softer, and we've got the even softer hyper soft tyre, and I think I was expecting more pit stops, and most of the races have been one stoppers, so I'm a little bit disappointed with that. But I don't think, can we blame Pirelli for that, Jonty, or is that just what they're given as a guide from the FIA?
It's harsh to blame Pirelli because, as Stuart said, they've been asked for one thing, they've done that, and then everyone said, "Oh, we don't like it," so they've done the next thing they're asked. My only issue with them is the fact that they don't seem to learn from their successes. Look back to the start of this year, China in particular, where we had a gap between the softer of the two compounds. That really threw the strategy up in the air, and people were trying all sorts of stuff. And they've only done it like one other time. And I don't get it. It worked. It worked brilliantly. It gave us spectacular racing and very interesting racing with the strategy. So why not do it again? We've seen them do it the last 2 races where they've had a gap the other side, but that doesn't really work as much because pretty much everyone's just going to use the first 2. And the people using the harder of the tyres is going to be nowhere because they're so slow in comparison. So that's my biggest problem with Pirelli.
See, I'm like Danny Rick, take the Hypersofts to every race. I think, why not? Because somebody will use them. I know it'd be crazy. You might only get 1 lap out of them in the race, but at some Grand Prix tracks. But I say give people that option if they want to take that option. But no tyre warmers in 2021 as well, Stuart. So that might appeal to Hankook because I don't know. They do other series, don't they, where there are no tyre warmers?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the tyre rules in other series. But yeah, they've some pretty big, important series. DTM, Euro F3, Supercar, GT 24 hours. They're not amateurs in this sport. And I think it's time for tyre warmers to go. It's easy to make a tyre that doesn't require a tyre warmer. And people are always complaining that, it's too dangerous. Teams, especially, particularly weirdly, that it's too dangerous to have no tyre warmers because the tyres will be too cold when they leave the garage, and it'll be too much of a difference between cars already racing and cars just come out of the pits. But actually, you just manufacture a tyre that has a different working range and that warms up pretty quickly. That is possible. It's not future science because we see it lots of places, including on the road, where I don't need to put my car in a tyre blanket before I go driving. But yeah, I think most tyre companies will be prepared for a season without tyre warmers. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think it will fundamentally change the nature of the rubber of the tyres, though, and how the tyres behave over the course of a stint and out of the pits and in their over the course of their life, which will be interesting to see.
I've got this image of Stuart coming out of his house now and he's got a team of mechanics, tyre warmers on his car, little garage and everything. That'd be brilliant.
Well, yeah, you don't know what I'm like.
Anyway, I'm going to move on from it. There's not really much more to say. Tyre wall would be great to see back, but I guess Jonty, and I said this to Stuart in a message earlier as well, if they have the tyre war, you run the risk of an Indy 2005. It's going to drive costs up as well. But I do miss that idea of not knowing who's going to have the strongest tyre at a weekend, not knowing what compounds are going to turn up. Obviously, that led to the problems at Indy. I can understand why they're not going to go with it, but in some ways, it does add another bit of spice to a weekend, doesn't it? An extra element of intrigue.
Yeah, that's true. That's what it's all about, just trying to spice things up again. Admittedly, it's in the direction of artificial, but there are other things they could do. Quite simply, just get rid of all the markings on the tyres so no one's got a clue. None of the teams know what the other teams are running at any point, even during qualifying, so that no one knows what people are going to start on for the race, for the top 10. Really spice things up because it will be a mystery all the time.
I like that. Might make the qualifying report a little bit harder on a Saturday, but I do like that idea, actually. Yeah, just to keep us all guessing. We're going to come to Q&A in a second. What I'm going to say very quickly is I was going to do some silly season, but I'm going to come straight to you both on this one because I'll get moaned at if I don't mention it. Kvyat and Wehrlein. Toro Rosso, Jonty, can you see that happening? I think Kvyat is likely to be announced at Russia, but Wehrlein as well?
I hope so. I can see it happening. I don't think it will, but I would like it.
What about you, Stuart?
I can't speak with any confidence in anything. I think I like to see that. Both those drivers, I think, deserve their chance in F1. I think Kvyat had a very hard time, and I think Wehrlein had an even harder time, really, considering he wasn't particularly given a chance. Yeah, I would like to see that. No idea if we'll actually see it.
It'd be a good story, wouldn't it? 2 drivers going for redemption to try and prove that they were good enough for F1 or are good enough for F1. I quite like that. The Kvyat thing I tend to believe because the rumours sort of came out and then it was, they're going to announce it in Russia, and I was like, I don't believe it. And then you think, well, hang on a minute. Kvyat's Russian. That'll be kind of perfect timing. So I think he's the most likely. I'd like to see Hartley stay because for no other reason than he's a nice guy. I think a few more of him in the sport. Him and Daniel Ricciardo, fill the sport with them, they'd be brilliant. But I think Kvyat, yes, I'm still going to say that Van Dorn has got to be in the frame for that seat with the Honda tyres. But yeah, why not Wehrlein? It'd be give us a good story. But we're going to go to Q&A because I don't want to talk too much about it. To be fair, actually, I don't know if you guys have noticed, it's been quite a slow news week this week.
Yeah, there's only been one team speculating about 2 or 4 drivers. So, given this silly season, that is very slow.
We needed a break. It's just silly season constantly on the channel, so it's nice to get a break. I'll start popping you questions into chat. I'm going to have a quick flick through, see if I've missed any from earlier. A few people saying Wehrlein is a solid driver. I'll tell you what, actually, what about while people putting questions in, Stuart, what about the Sauber seat? Do you see that going to a Ferrari Junior? Because there's a lot of talk that Giovinazzi's on for that, but there's still question marks over whether Ferrari are going to put a driver in that car. And I think they've got to the middle of October to make that decision, or Sauber can give that seat to who they want.
I think Sauber, like Toro Rosso, there's just huge question mark over what's happening here. I mean, I repeat myself overly, but this year I've not seen a year like this where we have absolutely no idea what's going on. So many contracts unsigned, so many seats with confusing. Yeah, I mean, some people talk about Giovinazzi. He hasn't been spoken about sort of in high-profile media, if you want to say that, if not mainstream media, as much as I would have expected, really. So I suppose he could be there, or they could hang on to the drive they've got. I have absolutely no idea.
I don't think I'm not even convinced Sauber do, mate, to be honest. I don't think anyone really knows what's going on this silly season. But go straight to question. I had one coming from Yo Borney. Thank you very much, mate, for the contribution. Really do appreciate that. It says, how do you guys feel about the betting sponsorship? I'm not going to get too much into that because I feel like that's something that we could quite easily talk about for quite a while. I'm not a fan of what I want to call hypocrisy behind it. It's not really hypocrisy, but they're talking about taking the sport back to a younger audience and in trying to entice youngsters into watching the sport. And then we've got Heineken banners all over racetracks, and then we're going to get in-race betting and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of completely going against what they're aiming to do in terms of bringing youngsters in. There's bigger problems with it than that, I can promise you that. But I think that's one of the issues that really annoys me quite a bit on it. I know you're not overly happy, are you, Jonty? Is a gentle way to put that?
I think it's disgraceful. If they're gonna allow that, they should allow tobacco sponsorship. To be quite honest, if they're going to allow anything that is both harmful and addictive, then they should either allow all of them or ban all of them. Alcohol, smoking, betting, whatever it may be. It's got to be one or the other.
It's a good point. They're picking and choosing, aren't they? Very much, and betting is very harmful. Like I said, I don't want to go too much into it. So, I kind of agree with you there, Jonty. What about you, Stuart? Are you a fan of this, or do you think this is a silly idea? Obviously, financially, it's not, because it's going to make them a bit of money, but...
Well, I mean, they can make lots of money, lots of places. I don't think I'm going to be able to add anything new to it. I'm not a big fan of betting. I'm not a big fan of advertising for betting and gambling. I don't think it's a good thing in society, and it's probably not best to go massively into that because we could go on and on and on. But yeah, no, I'm sort of basically what Jonty said, very much with him.
Yeah, I'm just dreading the idea of tuning into a race and then Crofty talking about something and going, oh, Vettel is catching Hamilton at 0.3 of a second a lap. Oh, the odds on him winning are 25-1. Head on over to such and such now and place your bet. And it's like, oh no, I don't want to, because I can see that happening. I really can. And I think that could be another nail in the coffin if they start doing stuff like that. Maybe I'm going over the top with it a little bit, but that's just how I feel. We'll move on from it. Patrick says, could Ocon go to Formula E next year and still be an F1 contender for a seat in 2020? He could. Obviously, Mercedes entering Formula E next year, so that's a possibility. But I always find that when a driver takes a year out or doesn't get a seat, they tend to get forgotten about quite quickly as the next young thing comes through and starts to shine. And I worry that if he goes and takes a year somewhere else, that'll be it, Jonty. We've seen it with so many, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. And it's a worry. But I think he's good enough for it not to happen. Hopefully.
I hope so. I really do. A few people asking about Mick Schumacher. I didn't see the third race. Did he win that one as well? Just having a quick flick through. Did Mick Schumacher win the third race, Jonty, today?
I didn't actually see on the third race, but he won the second, so he's now on 5. At that point, he was on 5 out of 5 in a row, and there's a significant lead. So, yeah, that's his now.
P2 in race 3, according to Apex Racer. Thank you very much, and everybody else that's popping that in. Incredible couple of weekends for him, and prior to this, I didn't think he'd get to Formula 1. I thought it was going to be difficult for him to live up to that name, that Schumacher name, Stuart. But I know you don't watch a huge amount of the feeder series, but the performances he's putting in, he's put himself right in the frame. I don't think for next year, but certainly for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I don't pay attention to all the feeder series, but you can't help but notice what's happening with Mick Schumacher. 5 race wins in a row and a second is nothing to be sniffed at, and I believe he's leading the championship now. So yeah, I mean, that puts him on the right trajectory to move up to Formula 2, Formula 1 over the next few years, should this kind of performance continue.
Yeah, fantastic and well-deserved. I've been watching him for years, obviously. Obviously, I've been watching the Schumacher for years, but yeah, it's great to see. Do you think the FIA are too lenient on accidents between teammates, says Cravone Gaming? I think we've covered that before, Jonty, or briefly talked about that sort of thing, that the FIA do seem to turn not a blind eye, but a bit more of a blind eye to incidents between teammates and almost let the team sort it out afterwards.
A little bit. It's going to be a case of it's fine for them to do that as long as there's no other driver involved. If they're only affecting each other's races, then yeah, I think it's pretty fair to let the team deal with it.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that one, Stuart?
That's an interesting point. I'm going to have to go away and think about that in terms of like data, like to sort of think about times when this has happened. In terms of a practice, whether I agree with it, I mean, there's a good point there. As long as they're not, driving too dangerously and affecting other drivers, then, I guess just let them have at it. But I mean, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. And we sort of veer into this area that we've discussed before with other types of incidents, like whether it's a championship leader or not, about how similar incidents are treated differently by the stewards in a contextual way and whether they should or not.
Yeah, the problem is you start to open up grey areas, don't you, in the rules, and I tend to think that the rules should be the same across the board, but I do wonder sometimes if the FIA head to teams like they might do with Force India over what happened at the weekend and say, sort them out, boys, because this can't be going on, otherwise we will give them a penalty next time or something like that. But it's an interesting point, and it might be worth, like you say, Stuart, have a bit of a read up and have a look at some of the numbers and see if there is any basis to that. But yeah, it could be quite an interesting one to sort out. Nexu says, which driver has impressed you so far this season? Well, prior to the last 2 races, Jonty, I would have said Kevin Magnussen, but he seems to have gone off the boil a little bit the last couple of Grand Prix.
Yeah, he has, which is a bit of an issue. I'm trying to think of else.
I think Sirotkin's impressed me a little bit. He's not done anything spectacular, but he's a rookie. There was a lot of question marks over him, some criticism as well. And he's come in and he's matching Lance Stroll. And I'm going to get people in chat in a minute going, oh, that's Lance Stroll. But, he's got a year's experience. He's got that under his belt, and Sirotkin's more than a match for him. So he's kind of impressed me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing about Sirotkin is that you can clearly see he's been getting better and better every single race. And that has to be respected.
Obviously, Leclerc. Why did I not mention him first? But yeah, obviously, Charles Leclerc has he's not surprised me. No, he's not surprised me at all. I expected him to do well. Maybe not as well as he has, but yeah. What about you, Stuart? Anybody really surprised you this year?
I'll tell you who has surprised me, although it's not someone in the lower end of the tables. Valtteri Bottas, who at the beginning of the year I kept being a bit rude about, but he was just sort of like filling that Mercedes seat, kind of mediocre, but probably shouldn't be in that seat. And actually, he's been pretty brilliant unfortunate bit of luck, but pretty brilliant in that seat. A lot of people have become quite invisible over this season. I haven't really considered Gasly that much during the season, but I think Jonty's right. Sirotkin has started to show himself over the last half quarter of the season. I'd be interested to see what he would be like not in that Williams, which completely dulls any driver's abilities and standings.
Have you got one that stands out for you, Jonty?
No, not really. Gotta be honest.
I think looking the other end of the spectrum, I'm quite surprised by Sainz. I thought he's not been bad this year, not by any stretch, but I expected more from him. And Van Dorn. I don't know if I mentioned before, but I do really rate Van Dorn. But he's not really... He's not been awful, but he's not really delivered this season like I expected him to. I thought this was going to be his big breakthrough year, but it's just not really happened. So... yeah, I'd go K-Mag if we're not looking at the Leclercs, but I would say K-Mag was a real surprise until the last couple of races where he started to struggle. So, Kovic says, and a couple of others as well, is the championship over? Coming to you first, Stuart. Is this World Championship done? I mean, there's 150 points on the board, so it can still swing, but he's going to need a lot of luck, isn't he, Seb?
Yeah, he is. And, the last few episodes of this podcast that I've been on over the last couple of months, I've been like, no, it's still Vettel's up for grab. They're still the strongest car. Hamilton and Mercedes have just had some good luck lately, but the good luck has stuck with them, hasn't it? Ferrari really have not managed to point what is probably still the strongest package in the right direction. They've made mistake after mistake, whereas Mercedes haven't. And I think it's at that point now where we do need a retirement from Hamilton to put Vettel back in the frame. And that could happen. There's been a lot of first corner incidents among the top six. So, keep your eye on that. But otherwise, it's going to be tricky to stop Mercedes now. Yeah,
I mean, what I would say, Jonty, is, which hasn't been mentioned much at all, really, is that, okay, he's going to need the form of his life to do it, probably the best 6 races of his career, but technically, the championship is still in Vettel's hands. If he wins every single race between now and the end of the season, he's world champion. So I can't see him winning all 6, but it is still there in his hands if he wants to really go for it. If he can really go for it.
Yeah, I mean, mathematically, you can still do it, but the chances of that happening are very, very slim. And you've got to think the fact that the mental game has gone for him now. So much added pressure on him where we'd already started to see those cracks. I mean, it's over for me.
Same as last year, Hamilton's come out from the summer break, hasn't he, and just found another gear. I mean, I don't like saying it's over because we've still got 6 races to go, and with an F1 channel, you kind of don't want it to be over with 6 races to go, but it's not looking good. But, anything can happen. This season has been crazy. It's been all over the place, so anything can happen in the last 6 races. But I have changed my tune quite a bit since Singapore, and I think he needs luck and he needs to pull out the form of his life. But I think I can't see Hamilton losing it now, not with the current form he's got. But we'll take a couple more. Zane has given a contribution. Thank you very much, mate. Really do appreciate that. Says Hamilton running Mercedes after 2020. Thoughts? I've long said that I think Hamilton will retire from Formula 1 at the end of 2020. So, yeah, I mean, if he wins the title in 2020, you might be tempted to stay on and defend it, Jonty, but I don't know why 2020 seems to stick for me with Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
Jonty's not so sure.
Yeah, I was convinced he was going at the end of this year, so I'm totally thrown now. 2020 seems to make more sense with the big rule changes, but perhaps he'd want to stick around to prove that he can still do it even when there's such a big change.
What about you, Stuart? Do you think 2020 is about right, or do you see him retiring sooner or staying around a bit longer?
I think if Hamilton gets to 2020 and he thinks, looking at the numbers, I could get the most championships ever, or I could get the most race wins ever. If I stick around another couple of years, I could do that. And if he thinks he's in a car or he could be in a car to achieve that, that might be the thing that keeps him around. But listening to him and speaking to him, it definitely seems like he's thinking about the next stage of his life. He's not thinking, I'm in F1 now, and I'm not even thinking ahead. I've got absolutely no thoughts about my future. But F1 is where I am here and now. Nothing else matters. So yeah, I think it will depend on what he thinks he can achieve. But yeah, 2020 does seem to be that kind of time where he'll stay or go. I don't think he'll run Mercedes, but I might have misunderstood that question.
I took it as still racing in, like running in, maybe. Yeah, but I'm going to put a question to... I'm going to get the last question today. Why not? I'm going to put it to both of you now. Whoever wants to answer first, that's absolutely fine. Do you think perhaps Lewis Hamilton fancies to go in that Ferrari, that scarlet red Ferrari that every driver dreams of being in before he retires?
I'll go then. I think he's the kind of guy that would. It is a kind of boyhood dream type situation to be in, and Lewis Hamilton is very much the kind of person to follow his boyhood dreams. So if that seat opens up, if Vettel decides he's had enough, or if Leclerc turns out to be a damp squid, it's not going to happen. Then yeah, I could see him taking that seat given the opportunity.
Jonty?
I would, if I was him. It's no matter how well you do, it's a massive feather in the cap of every driver. So I'd be going for it if I was him.
And if Vettel can't deliver a championship, Ferrari would absolutely snap up that opportunity, wouldn't they, before he retires? Because you don't know, when you're going to get another driver of Hamilton or of Hamilton's caliber or Vettel's caliber or anybody like that before. You've kind of got to seize the day, haven't you? So I wouldn't be surprised to see him stay on after 2020. I still think he will retire, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Vettel dressed in silver in 2021 and Hamilton in red in 2020. But we're going to leave it there because it's 7:15. It's gone 7:15. I cannot believe that's an hour and 17 minutes. I didn't think we were anywhere near yet, but apparently we are. So thank you very much, Stuart, for joining us again for today. It was a pleasure as always, and it'd be great to get you on again in the future as well.
Thanks very much. I had a great time. Hope it was good.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoyable as ever. And thank you as well, Jonty, for coming on. Glad you're feeling better as well, and great to hear your voice again on these streams.
Yeah, it's always great to be back. Thanks for having me on, and I'm sure we'll do it all again Wednesday.
Definitely lovely. Thank you very much, guys, and I will talk to you probably a little bit later.
See you later.
Cheers.
Lovely. Thank you very much to Jonty and to Stuart. And thank you, of course, to you guys for tuning in as ever. Once again, last time I'll say it, sorry again about Wednesday not being able to go live, but I'm going to be back on this Wednesday. We'll be live. There'll be content and videos throughout the week as well. And of course, Russian Grand Prix weekend next time around. I think everything's a little bit earlier in the day as well. So I'll pop a schedule up on Twitter for next weekend and let you know what's coming up. So there'll be plenty on there. But in the meantime, you can follow me on social media, of course. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.